So we're going to go ahead and start recording and get started with our presentation. So good afternoon, everyone, or evening. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you're in the right place. Finding your place, securing a job with potential, put on by the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed. This is going to be a 90-minute presentation. There will be a break included, so you will be able to stand up, stretch, grab some water, and as I said, it'll be recorded so you can look back on it, refer back to it at any point in time. There are resources included, and we'll get started. So I want to start this conversation by saying that if you're in a position where you're looking for a job and it's a job of necessity, whether it's tied to salary and income or benefits such as healthcare, there are still really great tips and tricks in this presentation. But this presentation is geared more towards if you have that type of job and you're looking to build your career, if you're looking at your your dream job, this is what this presentation will touch on. But again, still important no matter where you may be in your job search. If you're looking just to update your resume, if you're looking to fine tune your interview skills. Otherwise, we'll also do a focus on if you're looking at potentially grad school versus a job. Hopefully some of these questions that we ask throughout the presentation will be just as relevant. So today's goal is that we touch on a few tips and tricks to find the right job for you, whether it is updating your information because you want to go to grad school, whether it is updating your information because you want a new job, doesn't matter. Either one of those will touch on both of them. Some tricks to interviewing and asking the right questions, and then how to find the right job. How do you begin doing that search of organizations, and what does a job description tell you about how the job will be? There will be opportunities to put you into breakout rooms. Don't stress, you're not doing anything deep dive. You're really going to be working with Google Slides and Post-its. So if you were worried that you're going to try to uncover some deep, dark secrets, don't worry, that's not what's going to be happening in the breakout rooms. If you have questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat box. Thank you, Kip, right on top of it. We will be stopping for questions and shared experiences throughout the presentation. We are a smaller group, so if at any time you want to come off or put yourself on camera, come off of mute and engage, feel free to do so. I want you to be as comfortable and this to be as interactive as possible. So just in case you didn't think that I was going to introduce myself, good afternoon. My name is Brenna Goggin. I am the Mid-Atlantic Leadership Development Manager for River Network. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am on the historical lands of the Lenape and Nanticoke. I would welcome the opportunity for you all to introduce yourselves using the chat box and sharing whatever information you feel most comfortable sharing. If you're not familiar with land acknowledgements and the historical lands that you may be occupying, there is a website on the slide that will provide that information for you based upon your address. And if anybody's wondering, this picture was taken this weekend at my parents' home. They've gotten 3.5 to 4 inches of rain over the last several days. And outside of the horse barn is kind of our own pool that we made it. And we wanted to test the idea that the dogs would like the kayaks. So we got out my dad's kayak and put the dogs on top and figured it was a fun experiment anyway, if nothing else. No dogs were hurt in the making of this picture. They all swam and enjoyed themselves in the water because it was a very warm Saturday. If you have cool pictures from this past weekend that you would also like to share, feel free to do that as well. There is in the chat box a file option and you can share from that way. So keeping going, feel free to continue to share, welcome yourselves, introduce yourselves in the chat box. I just want to get started with the meat of the presentation. I want to put a plug in really quickly that job searching is hard. Anyone who tells you that it's easy, well, I'd like to meet them, because I've never gone through a job search process, either hiring somebody, interviewing myself, onboarding somebody that has ever been flawless and easy. So this is a process. Sometimes it's tiresome and frustrating, oftentimes really awkward. But the skills that you learn going through this process, whether you're building a resume, doing the interviews, trying to decide to go through grad school, will compound over time and eventually lead you to much bigger things. For example, paychecks, healthcare, and maybe even a job that doesn't feel like a job, that you wake up every morning excited and inspired to be a part of. Regardless of where you are in that journey, the following conversation, I hope, will prove to be very helpful. But just so that we have an idea of where you might be in your job search, I have put a poll on the screen. If you could take a minute to just let me know where you might be in your job search activities. This is anonymous, so I can't see what your answers are, nor can anyone else. So be as honest as you like. Oh, for those that are hoping this presentation will help you what to do, well, I hope that that is the end game. That was meant to be kind of a funny option, but feel free. My information is on the slide. If you'd like to have a more in-depth conversation about that, I am happy to do that. But it looks like everyone has completed the poll. Let's share these results. So it looks like some people are actively looking and putting their information out there. Congratulations. Some people are just browsing to see what is available that might tickle their fancy. They're thinking a change is necessary, but they haven't necessarily taken the steps. It doesn't look like, and this is really great news, anyone was confused or didn't think that they would have to update their information for a specific job. So yay, you're already ahead of the game, where many folks think that if I just keep submitting the same resume and cover letter for each and every job, eventually something will stick. That's not true. You do have to update your information to reflect the job that you are looking for. So let me remove the poll. So let's just say, since you all did, that you're actively looking and or you're just browsing the aisles to see what might be available. There are a ton of ways to find a job. And one of the great ways is through the groups that you're affiliated with today. So the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed, as a coalition, is constantly posting jobs in their newsletter from their member organization. So I encourage you to reach out to Kip, or you could just click on the link that she posted in the chat box, where she will keep you up to date on the job board. River Network also posts job opportunities from across the country to reflect our network, and we do that through our newsletter as well. There's also LinkedIn. There are a myriad of environmental job boards, eco job boards, conservation job board, NAEE job board, which is more for environmental education. So there are a wealth of newsletters and emails that you can sign up for. And then there's LinkedIn. If you haven't already, even if you're looking at potentially grad school, I would definitely recommend creating a LinkedIn account. This will be your professional face that many job hunters are going to be looking for when they Google your name. And by the way, your name will be Googled. So always a good idea, every couple of months, just Google your own name, see what Google comes up with, and see what is able to be seen by the public, and then try to modify that if there are things on there that maybe you wouldn't want your grandmother to see. Keep in mind a couple of things as you're looking through these job boards, that very likely finding your dream job just as you're starting out not necessarily a reality, at least not right now, but that doesn't mean that it can't be. And it doesn't mean that the job that you do get doesn't take you into the direction of whatever your next job might be. I would strongly suggest, especially in the middle of a pandemic, to stay as open to new opportunities as you possibly can. And understand that the entirety of the job will not be reflected in the job description. So hopefully out of today's presentation, you will be equipped with some questions, key questions that you can ask during the interview process to really dig in on what does this job actually entail. I do want to say that for those that are browsing, if you're coming across organizations that you're like, ooh, that just looks like a really cool place to work. It's checking all of my boxes that for location, for kind of culture that I can find on social media and online. I'm hearing great things about it in the community, but I go to their website and there aren't any jobs available. This is where doing some outreach yourself can be incredibly helpful. Hopefully you have heard the term informational interviews, but if not, that's when you reach out to whoever you think in the organization might be the supervisor or in charge of the work that you want to do. Usually not the executive director, but a director of some sort, or associate director, manager. Introduce yourself and just say, I'm job searching. I'd really like some more information about your organization, but also about the work and the community. Can you spare a half hour to an hour to talk to me? And then prepare your questions. What questions do you have for them? I have, in my career, hired 2 people, one of which is on today's presentation, that reached out to me for an informational interview. And I was so impressed by the way that they handled themselves, the questions that they were asking, the information that I was able to gather from them just on one phone call, that when I did have a job opportunity come available, I sent it to them and asked if they would please apply. So don't ever think that, oh, the pandemic means that there's not going to be a job opening for me, or the organization's not hiring, I should just move on. No, you never know when a job opportunity might present itself, and already having your foot in the door by making that introduction can be really beneficial. So how do you investigate an organization to even determine if that's really a place that you want to go? Word of mouth is super duper key. We are an environmental community, and environmental communities tend to be quite small, even though we are a region of many. Asking KIP if they have heard of an organization and what would they recommend, it can be really critical. Or anyone else that's part of the coalition, or even River Network, someone that's part of your grad school program. The environmental community does intersect with education quite frequently, so asking about programs and classes can also be helpful. There are also websites like LinkedIn that will tell you more about the organization. You can look up to see who's affiliated with that organization, and if they know somebody that you might know, that can get you an introduction to find out more information. There's also Glassdoor, which is a website that allows for employees to review the organization. Just keep in mind that the folks that tend to post on places like Glassdoor oftentimes are on their way out, or have been released for whatever reasons, or are not able to get out. And so the reviews can be skewed in one way or the other. So I just want to make sure that I put that plug in, that Glassdoor comes with its own caution sticker. So what are some important things as you're going through the job search that you should be looking for? A couple of best management practices can include the salary is included, or at least a salary range. This makes for the negotiation process to be much more transparent It also signals that the organization is likely more transparent in their hiring and onboarding practices, and that leads to other places where they may be transparent as well, and that's always a good thing. Look at the travel requirements. If the job description says that travel could be up to 30% of the job, that means that you're traveling for a good bit out of every quarter. Where are you in your job and work life, professional life, personal life? How much do you want to travel? Are you also a volunteer? Do you want to get involved in political campaigns? How likely is it that you can do that type of work while at the same time traveling for work? Do you have fur babies at home that you'll then have to find a sitter or someone to walk them to make sure that they're taken care of? And does the salary cover also the wear and tear on the vehicle that you'll be driving around? So for instance, do they have an enterprise or a rental car company partnership that would allow you to not have to use your car all the time? One of the things that's become quite a green flag is an equal opportunity statement. Do they make it clear that quality, diversity, and inclusion are an important piece of the organization's culture? And by such, they are making the pronouncement on the job description. That doesn't mean that if it's not included, that is not a focus of them. Maybe they haven't gotten to that piece yet, but that's usually a good indicator to look for. Are the qualifications in line with the responsibilities? This is something that the environmental community is taking a look at. For the longest time, at least since I even got involved in the environmental community, I'm not going to say how many years ago, master's degree was like the holy grail. Everybody had to have a master's degree. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know what the master's degree gets you that someone with 5 years of experience can't. And that's where looking at the qualifications and the responsibilities hand in hand can be really important. Does it state if there's any opportunity for growth or how the organization would like to invest in this position? That'll give you an idea as to whether or not this position could lead to other opportunities within the organization, or you might even have some of your own opportunities to grow the position and change the position to fit you. So this is the part of the presentation where it gets awkward for everybody, where we're going to go ahead and put you into breakout rooms. And we're going to answer the questions. So you're going to be in 2 breakout rooms. I think I have to look to see how many there are. 15. All right, we'll do 3 breakout rooms where you'll be answering the questions that are on that slide. So what do you look for in an organization? What are red flags for you? And what do you quote unquote look for in the job description that determines whether or not you will be applying for the position? So Kip went ahead and put the Google slide together. They're Googling together that you all can use. Hopefully you are able to get into the Google Forms with no problem. And between your groups, you will use the function to fill out each of the Post-it notes of whatever ideas that you come up with. So take a few minutes, introduce yourselves, and then get started on the Google Slides. We will come back and we'll have an opportunity to do a brain dump and talk about some of the stuff that came up for you in each of this. I am going to go ahead and have you guys meet for 15 minutes. And there will be a countdown timer for 60 seconds that should come up to let you know that you need to wrap it up. And then if you have any trouble when you go into breakout rooms, there is a raise the hand, kind of contact the host option. Just click on that and Kip or I will be able to pop into your room and deal with any IT issues that you may be having. While you're in your breakout rooms, come off mute, turn on your camera, say hello, and get to know everybody. Any questions before we break you out? I see shakes of head. So see you all on the flip side. Enjoy your conversations. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had really great conversation. I was really pleased to see that you figured out I had created 2 slides of each question because I forgot to give you that direction before I put you into breakout rooms. But let's do a little debrief here and see what you guys put into, what do you look for in an organization. I really love the idea around transparency. So the transparency in the process of hiring, who's going to be looking at the resumes, who's going to be conducting the interviews, looking on LinkedIn, how have employees stuck around and for how long, what might they have put if they left, a friendly, accepting culture, feeling of comfort, sustainability in the ethos of their culture. I love it. Does the organization place priority on diversity and inclusion? Usually they would have a statement that would say that. Does the organization have a good online presence? Shows commitment to reaching people. I have not seen that before. That is a really great point. Looking at the second one, positive sentiments from fellow grads and university alumni, opportunity for growth. Does anyone want to come off of mute and share any of the examples that they put on and why on this? What do you look for in an organization and how you might go about finding it? No, awkward pause. Okay, no problem.
I'll share.
Oh, great. Thanks, Brian.
So on the first slide, I put the sustainability as part of the ethos of the culture. And I mean a few things by that. In the most direct sense, I wouldn't want their financial office, be investing in fossil fuels and things that would be directly damaging to the environment. But as someone who's taken a lot of looking into environmental consulting firms, I mean that in terms of even how they approach their work, because some consulting firms just sort of do the job to do it, but they don't necessarily care. Whereas other firms, they really take a holistic look at the entire environment and kind of embed that in how they approach their problem solving.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Anyone else want to talk about what they look for in an organization and how they might go about finding it?
I put in, or our group put in the online presence. And I think that goes a long way for me because it's like how they put their first foot forward and what their face is like for people to see. And that kind of tells you what they expect you to look like when you get into the position. So it tells you so much more than just how polished they are. It also tells you how they expect you to act for, could be like the rest of your career, which I think is important. And it also shows if you're looking for an advocacy organization, how well are they doing that? And it shows through how they market.
And does it matter how many social media sites they have? Or is it really more of the wording and how often they're posting and what they're posting?
I think it's the second. I think it would be quality over quantity, and just making sure that it's professional. And maybe for me, it's like also youthful and with the times and understanding that there's different ways to go about things and how you do that professionally.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. So then what are some red flags? And usually, at least this early in the process, where you're just looking at job descriptions or organizations, the red flags are much easier to spot than the quote unquote, what are you looking for? Outside of Carly's example of online presence and the diversity and equity and inclusion statement, it can be sometimes difficult to know what kind of culture you're coming into, what are the organizations investing in, but the red flags, usually they're pretty obvious in this process. And so looking at a poorly written job description and where the qualifications and the responsibilities don't line up, if it's not grammatically correct, yep, that can definitely be a problem. No mention of benefits or not even a salary range. High turnover rate. If you've seen that this job has been open several times over several years, that could mean something. It also could mean that they're moving people up through the organization too. So just keep that in mind. A super long list of responsibilities. Potential time limit for a position, that's correct. A lack of equity and diversity statement. If the job is unpaid, will it provide a valuable experience? Posted on an unreliable website, Craigslist. My goodness. So if the person that wrote that or the group that wrote that would like to come on, I would love to just hear more about finding a job on Craigslist, because this is the first I've heard of this.
So I posted the first part of it because I
Okay.
know when I was looking for a retail job over the summer,
Okay.
there were some that were on Craigslist, but they were poorly written. They weren't really organized. I didn't really trust it, and the area I'm in isn't the best.
Okay.
So I kind of trying to stay away from that and stick to more like usajobs.gov, LinkedIn, stuff like that.
But you have had some success in finding a job on Craigslist?
Oh, I think someone else wrote that.
Okay.
Oh, that was me. Yeah, I've gotten a job on Craigslist before. Not in the
Really?
environmental field. I was working at a doggy daycare, but they're just a small business and they didn't really post on like the big websites. And I live in Philly, so it was my experience that I actually saw lots of job postings for like small businesses like bakeries and like small stores near me on Craigslist. But I'm sure there are a lot of like there are like probably a lot of like scammy weird things on there too. I guess you would just have to use your judgment and look for like the other types of red flags that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So small businesses using Craigslist because it's cheaper than posting on a place like, I know LinkedIn can be incredibly expensive to post a job. So being able to Google map the position, and hopefully they provide a contact information so that you can call to follow up would be a great idea. Want to talk about the one evidence that the job was not posted by a recruiter. So I don't know who posted this, if they would like to come off of mute.
That was also me.
Okay, tell me about this.
So I don't use LinkedIn a lot, but I've gotten a few messages before from recruiters on LinkedIn, and they don't say that they're recruiters. They just say like, they think I might be a good match for an exciting job opportunity or something. And then there'll be like a job description, but they won't say anything about like the actual like employer or the location. And then when I try to like look up this person's name or find more information, eventually I'll like connect it back to some sort of like recruiting organization. And I just kind of seems like, I don't know, I'd rather like deal with like the direct person that I would be working for.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is important to note that some of the larger environmental organizations, especially for positions higher up in the organization, will hire a recruiter or a recruiting company to do all of the back end work. So like filter out the resumes, do the job posting, and even do the initial screen before you're handed over to somebody like an executive director. That most often this is for organizations that don't have an HR department or an HR person, and they even maybe contract out their business and finance work. So just keep that in mind too. But the red flag, definitely, if they won't provide you who they're recruiting on their behalf and where that location is, definite big red flag as to what it is that they may be looking for. So looking at the job description specifically, what do you look for? love the travel requirements and where the job is located, looking at what is required as far as an undergraduate or graduate degree, and if it's in line with your major or minor. I will say that the major and minor eligibility, that's not always a deal breaker. Oftentimes, folks that are using previous job descriptions, and especially in the environmental community, you will see environmental science, environmental studies, natural resources, but it's really, we're just pulling degrees together that fit the science and saying, hey, if you have this, you could be qualified. But even if you have the soft sciences, like I was a political science major and a communication studies major, that was not part of the qualifications when I applied for my previous job. It was all hard science, but I was like, but I fit the qualifications, so let's just give it a whirl. So keep that in mind, that that's not necessarily a deal breaker. Field work and work-life balance, that Kip and I were just talking about some of our favorite positions, our favorite jobs prior to the work that we're in now. A lot of outdoor, getting outside, doing different cool stuff like GIS mapping can be a lot of fun. Looking at responsibilities and compare them to your personal ability to learn and responsibilities. Does the job description sound like something I would enjoy? That's a big key. If the qualifications and responsibilities for me said something about numbers and Excel and budget and finances, any of those words, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't do that. So that none of that would be of interest to me. The salary, growth process, and disclosure, all really good. And then, is the job description written in such a way that it sounds like it would be fun or meaningful work? That can be really important, especially when you work in the environmental nonprofit field, and in all likelihood are not going to get paid the same as you would as if you went into government work. Are there any questions about this activity? And just so that you know, I'm going to put all of this information in the PowerPoint slides when we send these back out to you. So you will have all of the information that was collected in your groups as part of the PowerPoint. But before we take a break, I just want to see, are there any questions about what we've gone over so far? No? Okay, well, let's take a 5-minute break. Feel free to turn your camera off. Feel free to mute yourselves. Take a break from the screen. Don't just check email or social media. Like, this is really a chance to get up, move around, get your refreshment of choice, and give your eyes a break from sitting in front of the screen. So we will see you back at 4:55. I just want to provide one more opportunity for any questions that you may have. Sometimes this type of even thinking about applying for a job or the interview process can be stressful. So I just want to make sure that everybody is feeling safe and comfortable. But just give you a second if you are not to post any questions that you may have as well. And again, we'll have more time at the end of the presentation. So let's say that you've been job searching, you found a position in an organization that sounds really interesting. The job description lines up perfectly with what you want to do. How do you set yourself up for success? So let's take a look at some of the materials, and we'll go through kind of what I personally, and keep in mind that it's all in the eye of the reviewer when it comes to resume and cover letters, but there are some key important aspects to that that will certainly move you further to the top than others. If you're just starting out, I want to reassure you that you should not worry if you have a lack of professional experience. You can turn any employment opportunity into some type of experience. So I think I know Kip called it out on one of the presentations that I gave. I was a cashier at a pharmacy, and I was able to implement a new checkout system. So I put that on my resume of led and implemented a new checkout system, because it showed leadership qualities, it showed an ability to think outside of the box, and an opportunity for potential growth in a position. I had initiative, and that was something that the summer internship that I was applying for was looking for. Are there other opportunities? Have you been a captain of some type of club team within your school, or even a group of people? Back before the pandemic, I played Ultimate Frisbee, and I was a captain for Ultimate Frisbee. That shows leadership qualities. That's something that you can do. What has been outside of school that you can also point to? Do you volunteer? If so, where? And how can you add those volunteer activities and tie it into what the responsibilities of the job are? How can you tie the work or the mission back to your own personal experience or professional desires? Resume is what tells the employer what skills you bring to the position. The cover letter is what tells the organization who you are. And so I want to caution really forcefully that do not, under any circumstances, submit the same cover letter and resume without any changes, without any updates, without personalizing it to out there for anybody. So you should be personalizing your cover letter and resume to reflect the job that you are applying for. Do not submit it without having somebody else look at it. Even if you are the most detailed oriented person, you are likely going to miss something, whether it's a comma in a weird place, or some type of grammatical error. And unfortunately, that can be what puts you in the no pile instead of in the yes or maybe pile. Even the design of the resume, which we'll go over here in a minute, can be just as important. And then looking at the cover letter, is it telling a story? How is it that the cover letter in the one page that you are allowed can tie in your wealth of experience or your passion for the position and the organization, and how are you personalizing that? When I was hiring for a position, I looked at someone's resume and I was like, why? They didn't have any of the qualifications that I was looking for. But I read their cover letter anyway, because I was just genuinely curious. And the cover letter told me a story about what they would do if they were in the position and how their previous experience would dictate that work. And they told it through like a fairy tale. And I was so blown away by somebody's creativity and thought that they put into designing that I had to meet them. And so I called them in for an interview, and it just so happened that they had a creative writing and journalism degree. And so they were able to put that to use in their cover letter, but they decided after they graduated that they wanted to get into the environmental field. And they thought that the job description that I had put out there would provide them with that opportunity. Now, through the interview process, we both came to a similar conclusion that that wasn't the right job for them. However, I was able to recommend them for another job with another organization, which they got. But that cover letter and how they were able to tell that story and inspire me is what got their foot in the door. So never underestimate the power of a well-written cover letter. So let's look at some good and some bad. I'm not sure why that arrow moved forward, but what makes a good resume a good resume? What makes a bad resume a bad resume? So the bad resume, sorry, not sure why this slide wants to move forward. Is you're telling me years. Okay, obviously my bad slide doesn't want to stay. I'm not sure. What the? I have a ghost, guys. The bad survey resume just goes into years. And okay, let me just, Apologies, not sure. There's no animation on my slides, nor has there ever been, but I'm just going to take it off of PowerPoint so that you can see it. You'll also see my notes, but that's fine. Okay, y'all are seeing that, right? Like the slides are moving forward on their own volition. Okay, just to make sure that you all can see. Just going to stop sharing for a minute, see if the ghost can get out of my computer, and then we'll go back. So what makes a resume ugly is that you have these years, it's not very well formatted. It doesn't really tell me anything about you, like what skills are you bringing? It just tells me that you went to school and here are your grades. Grades are not that important. The classes that you took and what you learned in that and how you can use that knowledge into your job, that's important. So if you're coming straight out of school and looking for a job, focus on the classes that you've taken and the volunteer experience or even that summer job that you've had and build that into the resume. The okay is okay because at least it has some skills listed. But again, not very well thought out. I would really like to see how you could use those skills or have used those skills in the past. So then comparing that, let's look at the good. And I did pull these offline, so just FYI, like these are publicly available. So what I really liked about the one on the left, David Gibbons, is he personalized it, right? There's colors associated with it, there's line breaks. It really makes it stand out and pop. I always appreciate when I'm hiring for a position that there is a personal statement at the top or something that you want to accomplish, your life's goal, something up there that really distinguishes you between any of the other resumes that I might be looking at. And then leading into the strong skills, what you've accomplished, how you use those skills, some type of experience, and tying that back to the qualifications. How do they line up with the responsibilities that you're being asked for in that job description of the qualifications? And then include your educational summary. Again, not so much focused on the GPA anymore, but really where you went to school and what classes did you take? All right, are you going to behave yourself? Probably not. Let's try this again. So let's just say that you haven't decided whether or not you want to go to grad school or if you want to go and get a job. Taking the time to actually do some self-exploration and self-awareness can be really critical. And I know firsthand when I was going to graduate school full-time and working full-time, I didn't have time to figure out what it is that I liked. I had student loans that I knew that were coming due and I needed health insurance. So like really any job that was willing to hire me and was willing to give me health insurance was like the job that I was looking for. However, I wish I would have taken some time, even if it was during spring break or during the summer, to do more self-exploration, asking myself questions that about what would make me happy, what brings me joy, what do I enjoy doing, what brings out the best in me, and then what doesn't and why, to really begin to figure out what jobs I should apply for and where I might have the best use of my time. And so 2 resources that I strongly recommend if you're interested in doing some more of this self-exploration is the first is the What Color is Your Parachute? This is a book that comes out every single year. You can get it at the library or the bookstore, Amazon, what have you. And it asks you some really great questions. It takes you through some really wonderful exercises to help you with that exploration of what you like to do, what you don't like to do, why don't you like to do it? And it provides really good insights that you otherwise probably wouldn't have time to think about. Several years ago, this was recommended to me by my then executive director when I told her that I was ready for a change, but I wasn't exactly sure what that change was. And for years I had been looking for a job and everyone kept asking me, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. This book, when I sat down on vacation for a week with it, helped me to really narrow down what it is that I wanted to do and what that looked like. And that actually resulted in me applying for and receiving the job that I have now at River Network, because I found that what brought me joy, what I really enjoyed, and what inspired me lined up with what River Network was looking for. I also went through a leadership training program where we purchased the book on Discover Your Clifton Strengths. And when you purchase the book, you get the test for free, which is why I'm recommending it. But at least begins to, it's not like the typical personality tests. It really does break down how you like to lead. What are your leadership qualities? And so, as often is the case, you may be asked, well, what are some qualities that show leadership in an interview process? Just pointing to this could be helpful in being able to answer that question, but also help you to understand how you like to be led, and then how you also lead others. This type of self-awareness is critical if you decide that you want to move up in the organization and take on more leadership qualities, because you will then be aware of the fact that others, those that you're leading, have their own ways that they like to be led and their own ways of leading. And so being able to build in, appreciate, and encourage their own leadership skills and hone those with them will be critical. There is a time and place for personality tests. If you haven't yet and you're genuinely curious, there are different personality tests like the Myers-Briggs, the Emergence Profile, there's an emotional intelligence test. They're all out there, they're all online. There's even what color are you? There's the Enneagram. They can be fun and they can be informative. However, these, whatever you may be, can change over time. It can change with experience, with your age, exposure, through different jobs and different opportunities. It's also, as we have found through exploration of these personality tests, it's in the eye of the tester. So what color are you test is really focused more in what we would consider masculine tendencies. They put a lot of award and reward in those types of qualities, and qualities that tend to be more feminine in description and nature were seen as negative. So just keep in mind when you're doing these tests, who created the test and by whose lens are you being judged? So I just want to make sure that I make that up front. Like I said, the what color is your parachute was transformative for me. And if nothing else, if you have an opportunity to have access to it through your library, I would strongly recommend that you take a look at that. So let's say that you have made it all the way to the interview process. And there are, of course, going to be really awkward questions, coming your way. For those that have been part of an interview process already, whether it was an interview to get into school or an interview for a summer job or a part-time job, what have you, or a job that you're currently doing, I would love to know some of the interview questions that you have been asked that you thought were the absolute worst and you really wish that you'd never been asked those, or ones that you were like, that's the most awesome question in the world. I didn't realize that I even needed to know that about myself. So if you want to take a minute to put that in the chat box, would love to know what interview question drives you nuts, or you wish that was never asked of you, or the one that had you thinking and reflecting in a way that if you ever have an opportunity to ask it for someone else, you will do that. Oh, Sandra put, I was asked how old I was during the interview. Yeah, that would elicit a long, awkward pause. FYI, there is no place where that's an appropriate question to be asked during an interview process. Oh yeah, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Oh, like I don't even know where I see myself tomorrow. Like, are you kidding me about this 5-year thing? Ooh. See, I don't know if that's mean or brilliant, Stephanie. So a friend of hers was asked to do a complex multiplication in her head on the spot. Now for me, I wouldn't have even made it into that interview process because math without a calculator, no. But I will say that more and more organizations are looking for opportunities outside of just the resume and cover letter experience to really get to know you more. And so they will often provide you with a problem or a scenario and ask you how you would handle it. Oftentimes this comes during the interview process. It may come after your initial in-person, face-to-face or virtual interview, or it could come at the end. But that usually helps the hiring committee to begin weeding out people as well, especially when they're stuck between two people that they just love and they're having a hard time distinguishing between them. Oh yes, tell me something about yourself that isn't on your resume. I always appreciate that question. What type of animal would you be? Oh, how would you communicate to a group that had different levels of interest? Yeah, it's really great when people ask you questions about yourself, right? It usually puts you at ease. It gives you something to focus on. Usually it brings a smile to your face, especially what Hogwarts house you are. That's a deal breaker for me from now on. I only hire certain houses. Those that shall not be named are no longer part of that category. And so having those fun questions thrown in can put you at ease and it give you a sense of what type of culture am I walking into? If they're just the standard questions, that gives you an idea of like, well, maybe they're not going to be like the cut loose, fun organization that's going to go to happy hour on a Friday night. And maybe that's really important to you. I do want to touch on, again, kind of going back to the beginning of this, is that I'm talking about all of this as if the world is your oyster and you're not in a position where you absolutely positively need a job. I have been in that position myself where none of this mattered. I needed a job and I needed healthcare, and that is okay. What I would recommend for you, if you're doing that, is have that job. Try to see what you can get and maximize from that job. What are skills that can come out of it? What are knowledge areas that you don't currently have that you can potentially build on? What are relationships that you can build that can get you another job or another opportunity? Feel free to take a job because it provides you with the income or the benefits that you need. It is much easier to then go looking for another job or a career as you are having income and you have benefits. It's much more difficult if you are stressed about where your next paycheck is going to come from, where the rent is going to be paid, and how can you pay to get a tooth pulled at the same time that you're trying to look for a job. So I want to reassure anyone that's kind of stressing through this that it is perfectly okay to accept the job while you look for the job, as I put it. So talk about the interview process. You've been invited in for an interview. What do? This is going to sound silly. I strongly recommend this though. Role play. Find somebody that you trust, whether it's a colleague or a friend or a family member, but someone that you can trust that's going to provide you feedback, critical feedback about how you answer questions, your facial expressions, what type of language you're using, because role playing that out can help you, especially when you're in a virtual space, because that can be really difficult. I build my energy off of other people's energy. Really hard to do when you're doing it through a computer screen. So figuring out ways that your face might show up on the camera, and how you might come across, how much time you may have or not have to answer a question, and getting comfortable with that can be really key. So finding a partner that you can role play with. It is perfectly okay for you to take a breath after being asked a question. And if you're in person being asked to come in for an interview and you're comfortable with that, if you have a list of things that you wanted to make sure were covered in that interview, bring that list with you. That's okay. Bring your own notebook, piece of paper, have that out with you during your interview process. If you're virtually, no one that's not going to think anything about you other than you came prepared. And that can only be positive. Pick out your outfit ahead of time, even if it's in a virtual space. It's one less thing that you have to worry about, and figure out how you want yourself to look. Where are you gonna be if you're doing this virtually? What room are you gonna have? Do you have a blank wall that you can have a virtual background on? Or do you need to find another space that doesn't have something inappropriate on it? Figuring out those logistics ahead of time can be important. If you remember at the beginning of this, that the social media engines that you are using to find a job, your potential employer is also using them to find out information about you. And so Googling yourself every couple of months can be really important to flag what pictures or posts or things that you've been tagged in that you might not want your employer to see. So checking out your social media just to see what they would find when you come looking before you go into the interview process can be really important. It's okay for you to ask questions before the interview process begins. You don't have to wait until you're in the interview to begin asking questions. So if you've been invited in for an interview, it is perfectly within your right to ask who's going to be part of the interview process. This can be really important because then you can also stalk them on the webpage. Who are they? Who are their faces? So at least you have some recognition as you're going into the interview. What experience or background are they bringing into the interview experience, interview process? How long do you think the interview will last? This is important information, especially in the virtual space and as you're balancing classes, making sure that you understand that you're going in for an hour interview and they thought you were coming in for a 4-hour interview. Just important to be able to communicate those expectations. And is there anything that you would like me to bring with me? This provides the opening in case they want to surprise you with like any type of, hey, put together this and let me know how it works out for you, PowerPoint presentation. If you had your own computer, at least you might feel more comfortable putting that PowerPoint presentation together in the 15 minutes that they give you. During the interview, it's perfectly fine for you to have your own questions. Invariably, the interviewer, and I was always a big one, what questions do you have for us? I am a big fan of asking your potential employer, how have you or how would you questions. So if given a scenario where an employee was late on an assignment, how would you react? Is a really great question to ask. To figure out what type of culture are you walking into. I saw from your website and social media that, going back to Carly's point about a social media presence and a web presence, can you tell me more about this? What that says to me as the interviewer is that you took the time to look through that social media presence and were invested enough in the organization and the job that you wanted to know more. Also, fair question is what growth potential is associated with this position? That's perfectly fair question to ask during the interview. One that often gets thrown to a potential employee, which I always like to throw back, is in the first 90 days, what do you think will be the most important tasks for this position to do? Oftentimes you'll get asked as the person applying for the job of, what do you think you need to do in your first 90 days? Which I feel is a very unfair question. You don't know the organization, you don't know the job. Like, how are you supposed to answer that? So I always like throwing that one back at the interviewer and asking them, Stephanie, what do you like about working here? Yes. I worked for an organization where we were interviewing something and they said, tell me 5 positive things about working here. And if you see hesitation on anyone being able to answer those 5 positive things, that tells you a lot. Asking for, provide a day in a life of this position. What does the day-to-day look like? Also fair. Relate any questions that they give you back to an experience that you have. This is your opportunity to build on any of those stories that you might have told in your cover letter. Learn from previous mistakes and make no mistake about it. You are going to make mistakes through this process. I looked for a job for 5 years before I found this position with River Network. And I was asked in an interview, I was asked to come to DC 6 times for an interview process for an organization. I was given 24 to 36 hours notice to come to DC. I was not asked if they could pay my way. So I was taking Amtrak, which is not cheap, especially on short notice. And during the 4th interview, I believe, I was meeting with one of the vice presidents of the organization, and they asked, what do you think makes you perfect for this position? And even after 4 interviews with the same organization, I couldn't possibly answer that question because I couldn't get a straight answer as to what this job did. Should have been a red flag to me, but I was so new to the interviewing process that it wasn't clear to me that no one being able to tell me what the job was going to entail or not should have been a red flag. So what I said back is, actually, I'm not sure. I was hoping that you could clarify what the job is. Needless to say, after 6 interviews and 6 train rides to and from DC, I got an email that said, thanks, but no thanks. All of these things tell me so many things about the organization now that I didn't necessarily realize then. The fact that they would ask me to come to DC with such short notice, the fact that they didn't offer to pay for my transportation to get there, the fact that I had to go through 6 interviews, and this was not an executive level position, and the fact that they responded after 6 interviews and all that effort with an email tells me a lot about the organization's culture, and that I probably would not have enjoyed my time working there. Regardless of how the interview goes, always make sure that you follow up with a personalized email to every person that was part of that interview process. Hopefully their email can be found online. It's also, if you're going in person, perfectly okay to ask them for business cards. And if you don't get it, if they call and they're like, I'm so sorry, we weren't able to offer you this position, it is okay to ask if they'd be willing to provide you feedback. There may have been something that you could change or improve on, or anything that might be helpful during this process. And this would be the most appropriate time to ask if they would be willing to share that. Don't ever ask for a redo. If you've made a mistake, just acknowledge the fact that you made a mistake and move on, but don't try to ask for a 2nd or 3rd interview to make it right. I do want to do a check-in and see where we are, see if there are any questions. So just on the off chance that you decide that the library does not have what color is your parachute or what have you, I did think that doing a journaling exercise could at least begin the process. If you have the time and are looking for a job, or you're still doing just that browsing, doing this journaling exercise can be really important to begin narrowing down your search. Let's just say that there are 500 jobs currently available. Hopefully by answering these questions, that'll at least narrow you down to 250 and get you started on the road to finding a job that fulfills most of your wish list. Again, you'll get these slides, and I encourage you to take whatever time that you need to answer the questions along the way. And some of these questions might even come up in your interview process, so having them written down can be incredibly valuable. So key takeaways, looking for a job, learning about yourself, securing the right position. It is a process. It's not going to happen overnight. Some are lucky that the right position comes along early. Others find that job towards the end of their career, and that's okay too. Whatever you need right now is the most important thing. And hopefully this presentation sets you up to consider what is out there. How do you best prepare yourself and position yourself to be in the best place possible in order to get the job that you're looking for? Setting your own goals, knowing yourself well enough and evaluating those goals over a period of time will also help to answer that question that everyone's going to be asking you. So what do you want to do when you graduate? Hopefully this exploration exercise will help you with that. I've also included some resources so that there are some free aspects of What Colors Your Parachute online, at least when it comes to job interviews, that you can find the websites to the Clifton Strengths and others. And then just leave you with the closing. What have you learned about yourself today that you have written down that you want to carry forward? How can you implement any of these skills or questions or knowledge areas and implement them over the next month? And then you will be receiving an email from me with these slides, a recording once the CDRW has put it up on their YouTube page. And that way you have resources. That means you'll also have my email. I encourage you at any time to please reach out. And otherwise, I wish you a very, very good rest of your evening. Right, Kip did put in the chat box that we are doing another presentation, Making Space, Building Relationships and Finding Your Voice, on April 12th from 4 to 5:30. So thank you all so very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.